Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Once again, it is time for my client Lewis's vlog. And again, those of you who follow these vlogs, you know the bit of the backstory. Hard gainer, bulked him up. He got injured and got sick, both completely unrelated issues that knocked him way back. And then we've started rebuilding him since. And, he's just been consistently putting in the work. We're now in a phase to where he's doing his first real cut. He is, of course, finding it unpleasant. He's like, "Wow, coach, this sucks. I can't believe how much harder it is to train in a calorie deficit." Because for the most part, he's been bulking. Like, we didn't need to cut before because he got really sick and lost a lot of body weight. Right? He lost fat, he lost muscle, all of that. So we've been rebuilding him back up. He's been eating, he's been bulking. And we've taken his weight up. And accordingly, his strength has gone up, muscle's gone up, but he's also like, I'm a little squishier than I'd like to be. So I'm letting him, do a bit of a cut, right? He wants to lose some body fat, so we're going to slowly lean down, get him down to where he's at a comfortable body fat that's healthy, that he feels comfortable at, and then we're going to repeat the process. Okay, we're going to repeat the process. And, a lot of times people don't get that. People who don't understand lifting and understand our world will be like, well, that sounds like yo-yo dieting. No, it's not really, because we're gaining muscle. We're gaining muscle the whole time. And it's simply put, it's just a lot easier to gain muscle far, far, far more quickly if we're gaining body weight. And then, what we tend to do, we trim the body fat off that we gained to get that back to a comfortable level. And this is a process that people repeat for years and years and years. And accordingly, it allows them to just continue to make progress. And I'm not saying you can't do it the other way to where you just get fairly lean and then slowly build up. Just be aware that is actually a more arduous process, right? Less room for error. Because then if you're never doing a cut, well, what happens if you have a period of time where you overeat too much? Well, then you never lose the body fat you gained from it. Okay. So there's a lot of reasons we usually do it this way, and I'm not saying everyone has to. I don't even really do that these days myself, but I do stuff a little different. It doesn't mean that's how we're going to do most clients. All right, so you guys can see he still does a max effort and a dynamic effort setup. I'm letting him do more arm work because he always feels bad about his arms. And that's another thing I always point out to young men. A lot of times young men, they'll put so much emphasis on how big they think their arms are without realizing that they're not big. In other words, they want to obsess over arms so much, and he's guilty of this. Again, many young men are, and I'll add extra arm work for them anyways. But they'll identify that with their muscle mass without realizing arms are relatively small muscles in the grand scheme of things, and that they may just need to get bigger overall. But they're only seeing the arms, and it's like, and here's an example I give someone, like, well, how big do your arms think you think your arms should be? And they're like, well, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's like, well, there are bodybuilders bigger than Arnold who didn't get his size arms. Like, but, that's besides the point. There are bodybuilders who had more total muscle than him that still had slightly smaller arms. But then it's like, do you want to get his size overall? And then it kind of clicks to people. I'm like, Arnold wasn't purely that size, and he's probably not the best example for modern bodybuilding, but it's a reference people will get. He wasn't entirely that big just because he did arm training. It's because he had a lot of upper body muscle overall. Yes, the arm work played a role. But realistically, does anyone think they're going to have 20 less pounds of muscle than him and have arms that size? He was almost disproportionate already. See the issue? How big are you going to get? And again, if someone gets really big overall, even with just multi-joint movements, they're still going to have big arms, right? Barring a few genetic outliers. Ironic, I am one of the people who can fall into that category. But again, this is why I point out to people, don't always use your influencer or your coach or whatever as the example. So I tell people who are going to start coaching, don't always use yourself as the example for what you're doing with your clients. You need to understand where your clients are different from you. Okay? So always be aware of that. In his case, though, I'm letting him do it because, okay, I see his point. He could use the extra arm work, but he does need to get bigger overall, right? He does need to get bigger overall. But it's not going to hurt him to do this bit of arm work, as long as we don't overdo it. As long as we don't do anything that's going to damage his tendons, we keep the tendons healthy, it's fine. Then he's happier with the training. Something coaches need to keep in mind too, when you're dealing with clients. And in his case, obviously, we want to get really strong too. We're on a strength program, but size plays into that. But the thing is, when we're dealing with clients, understand where they're coming from. And sometimes you have to adapt the training based upon what they really feel they need. Now, is this always the case with your competitors? Well, that's different. And that's a big fight. That's a fight I always deal with my lifters. I don't think this works, It's like, well, if you just did it and followed through and believed in it, you would probably be a lot better. Okay. It's a side point. I know some coaches, though, who coach both types who actually get very extreme with it. Some very good coaches. They're like, I don't give my power lifters or my strength athletes any say at all in their training, none. I know some coaches who are like that. There are people who are more physique oriented. Their general population, they give them a lot more leeway. Their strength athletes, they're like, they don't get to pick anything. just an FYI. But, the thing to keep in mind, you got to keep your clients to where they believe in what they're doing. And sometimes you've got to give them things that you don't think are necessary in the training, make adjustments you don't personally think are that big of a deal because they feel that they really need that change. They've got to believe in the training. And as long as you can do that and it helps their progress and doesn't hinder it, works out great. And in the case of this, absolutely. If he wants a little extra arm work, that's okay. Throw some arm work in. It might help a little. And it's not going to hurt him as long as we're careful with it. But otherwise, you guys see what he does. He's on a very simple upper-lower conjugate, right? There's nothing fancy in it. We just keep it programmed, keep it moving, keep it doing what we want it to do. Based around his equipment and where he's at. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.